All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a world that's, well, it's pretty crucial to how your car runs and also how it impacts the environment. We're talking about oxygen sensors.
Yeah, these little guys, they don't get a lot of attention, but they play a huge role in keeping our cars running efficiently and cleanly.
And we're focusing on Walker products. They're a real powerhouse in the oxygen sensor market and the broader automotive aftermarket too.
Absolutely, and we'll get into how and why they've become such a go-to name for quality replacement parts for, pretty much every car out there.
Okay, so for those who might not be super familiar, let's start with the basics. What exactly does an oxygen sensor do? Like, why should we even care about them?
Okay, so imagine this. Your engine is burning fuel, right?
Right.
To burn cleanly and efficiently, it needs the perfect mix of air and fuel.
Makes sense.
That's where the oxygen sensor comes in. It's constantly monitoring the exhaust gases coming out of the engine. Specifically, it's measuring the amount of oxygen in those gases.
Like a little detective sniffing out the exhaust.
Exactly. And it sends this information to your car's computer, the ECU.
ECU, right?
Yeah, the engine control unit. And based on that information, the ECU can adjust how much fuel is injected into the engine.
So it's like a feedback loop, constantly fine-tuning the air-fuel mixture.
Exactly. And the goal is to hit that sweet spot, what we call the stoichiometric ratio. For gasoline engines, that's about 14.7 parts air to 1 part fuel.
14.7 to 1, got it.
Hmm?
So when that ratio is just right, what happens? What are the benefits?
Well, first off, you get the most efficient combustion. That means more power from your engine, smoother running, better acceleration.
So more pep in your step.
Yeah, definitely. And equally important, you get better fuel economy.
Ah, so that hits our wallets directly.
It does. When your engine's running lean, meaning there's too much air, or rich, too much fuel, you're wasting gas, and nobody wants that.
Especially with gas prices these days.
Right, and then there's the environmental side.
Yeah, can't forget about that.
The optimal air-fuel ratio means fewer harmful emissions coming out of your tailpipe. Things like carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, nitrogen oxides, all that nasty stuff that contributes to air pollution.
So a tiny little sensor can have a big impact on the planet.
It can, and that's why oxygen sensors have become so crucial in modern cars. They're essential for meeting those ever-tightening emission standards.
And as you mentioned earlier, these sensors have evolved quite a bit over the years. They're not just simple on-off switches anymore, right?
Oh, definitely not. It all started back in the late 70s, early 80s.
With those basic unheated sensors.
Yeah, those early ones were pretty limited. They took a while to warm up, which meant they weren't very accurate during those first few minutes after you start your car. And they had to be placed in very specific spots in the exhaust system, usually right near the hot exhaust manifold.
So not ideal.
Not really. But then came the heated sensors, which were a big step forward.
Those are the ones with 3 or 4 wires, right?
Yeah. Yep, those extra wires provide power to an internal heater, allowing the sensor to warm up much faster. That meant they could be placed further downstream in the exhaust system, closer to the catalytic converter.
Okay, and why is that placement better?
Well, for one, it allows for more accurate readings because the gases are more evenly mixed at that point, but also it helps the catalytic converter do its job more effectively.
Remind us what the catalytic converter does again.
Sure, it's basically a filter in your exhaust system that converts harmful pollutants into less harmful substances before they leave your tailpipe.
Ah, so the oxygen sensor helps the catalytic converter clean up the exhaust more efficiently.
Precisely. And then things got even more advanced with the introduction of FLO and UFLO sensors.
FLO, UFLO, what are those all about?
So FLO stands for fast light off, and UFLO is ultra fast light off. These sensors have even more powerful heaters, so they warm up incredibly quickly, like within seconds of starting your engine.
And why is that super fast warm-up so important?
Because the majority of harmful emissions are produced during those first few minutes after you start your car when the engine's cold. So by getting the oxygen sensor up to operating temperatures as fast as possible, you significantly reduce those cold start emissions.
Makes sense. So it's all about minimizing the environmental impact.
It is. And then came another major leap forward, wideband sensors.
Those are the ones you also called air-fuel ratio sensors.
Yeah, same thing. These sensors provide much more precise and detailed information about the air-fuel mixture compared to the older narrowband sensors.
So instead of just telling the ECU whether the mixture is rich or lean, they give it a more specific reading.
Exactly. And that allows for even finer control of the fuel injection, leading to even better fuel economy and lower emissions.
It's amazing how far these little sensors have come.
It is, and it's a testament to the ingenuity of engineers who are constantly striving to improve efficiency and reduce environmental impact.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about Walker products specifically. What sets them apart in the oxygen sensor market? Why have they become such a trusted name?
Well, a lot of it comes down to their unwavering commitment to quality. They engineer and manufacture their oxygen sensors to meet or exceed OE specifications.
OE meaning original equipment.
Exactly. So you're essentially getting a part that's just as good, if not better, than what originally came in your car.
That's reassuring to know, especially when you're dealing with a critical component like an oxygen sensor.
Absolutely. You don't want to cheap out on something that can affect your engine's performance and your car's emissions. And Walker goes to great lengths to ensure their sensors are built to last.
Like how? Give us some examples.
Well, for one, they use a porous ceramic coating on their sensors to protect them from contamination and erosion. You know, the exhaust environment is pretty harsh, lots of hot corrosive gases and particulate matter flying around. So that coating acts as a shield, extending the sensor's lifespan.
Smart thinking.
And they also include anti-seize compound with their sensors.
Anti-seize, what's that for?
It's a lubricant that you apply to the threads of the sensor before you install it. This prevents it from seizing up in the exhaust manifold over time due to heat and corrosion, makes it much easier to remove later on if you need to replace it.
So they're thinking ahead, making things easier for mechanics and DIYers down the road.
Exactly. It's all about attention to detail and going the extra mile to ensure customer satisfaction.
And then there's the whole coverage aspect. Walker's known for having an incredibly wide range of oxygen sensors, right?
They do. They cover pretty much every make and model you can think of, both domestic and import.
So whether you're driving a Ford or a Ferrari, they've got you covered.
Pretty much. They're all about full market coverage. This is a huge advantage for mechanics and parts suppliers because it simplifies the process of finding the right part.
So no more hunting through multiple catalogs or websites trying to track down the right sensor.
Exactly. And to make things even easier, they have that really handy online find your part tool on their website.
Right, at www.walkerproducts.com.
Yeah. You just enter your vehicle's information and it'll give you a list of all the compatible oxygen sensors. It takes all the guesswork out of it.
So they've made it super user-friendly.
They have, and that's another testament to their commitment to customer support. They want to make it as easy as possible for people to find the right parts for their vehicles.
Now, we've talked about why oxygen sensors are important in general, but let's get specific about the different types of sensors and why you might need to replace them.
Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, there are upstream and downstream oxygen sensors.
Upstream being before the catalytic converter, downstream after.
Right. And they have different roles. The upstream sensor is the primary one that measures the oxygen content in the exhaust gases and sends that information to the ECU. This is the sensor that's directly involved in controlling the air-fuel mixture.
So it's the main player in keeping the engine running efficiently.
It is. The downstream sensor, on the other hand, is more about monitoring the performance of the catalytic converter.
Making sure it's doing its job of cleaning up the exhaust.
Exactly. So if the downstream sensor starts sending weird readings, it could indicate that the catalytic converter is failing.
And that could lead to a whole host of other problems.
Definitely. So it's important to pay attention to both upstream and downstream sensors.
Now, sometimes you hear advice to replace all the oxygen sensors at the same time, even if only one seems to be failing. Is there any truth to that?
There can be. You know, as oxygen sensors age, their performance can degrade. They become less responsive and less accurate.
Like an old athlete who can't keep up anymore.
Sort of. So if you replace just one sensor, the ECU might see a discrepancy between the readings from the new sensor and the old ones.
That could cause problems.
It could. The ECU might misinterpret those readings and start adjusting the fuel mixture in ways that are actually detrimental to the engine's performance.
So it's like throwing a new player into a team of veterans who are used to playing a certain way.
Yeah, it can disrupt the balance. So by replacing all the sensors at once, you ensure that they're all operating at the same level of performance and you minimize the risk of the ECU getting confused.
Makes sense. It's like giving the whole engine a fresh start.
Exactly. And it's often recommended to replace all the oxygen sensors as part of your regular maintenance schedule, especially if you're approaching the typical lifespan of those sensors.
Which is roughly how long?
Well, it depends on the type of sensor and your driving habits, but unheated sensors tend to last between 30,000 and 50,000 miles, while heated sensors can go for 60,000 to 100,000 miles, sometimes even more.
Okay, so it's not an exact science, but it's good to be aware of those general guidelines.
It is. And if you're noticing any symptoms that might point to a failing oxygen sensor, like poor fuel economy, rough idling, or the check engine light coming on, it's definitely worth getting them checked out.
And of course, if you do need to replace your oxygen sensors, Walker Products is a great place to start your search.
Absolutely. Their reputation for quality, coverage, and support is well deserved.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've learned about the essential role oxygen sensors play in modern vehicles, the evolution of sensor technology, and why Walker Products has become a leader in this market.
It's been a fascinating deep dive into this, often overlooked but crucial component.
It has. So as you're driving around, remember those little oxygen sensors working hard to keep your engine running efficiently and cleanly? And if you ever need replacements, consider choosing a trusted brand like Walker Products. You'll be doing your car, your wallet, and the environment a favor.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Until our next deep dive, keep those engines humming.